heart and brain cells and make sure that you explain well. How we gonna break the marks from jails and put people back on track so they can excel? On the street, them need freedom, so we feed them with wisdom, cause wise cuts down weeds and exposes the darkness so that evil is revealed. And when evil get revealed, that's when people get healed.
This is the Run and Tell podcast.
Each one united, come on, don't fight it. You heard it here first, now run and tell of the righteous riot. Each one united, come on, don't fight it. You heard it here first, now run and tell of the righteous riot.
This is the Run and Tell podcast.
Each one united, come on. Each one united, come on, come on. Each one united, come on, don't fight it. You heard it here first, now run and tell of the righteous riot.
All right, hello everybody. This is Miles Ornelas. You are watching the Run and Tell podcast / web show, where we highlight the goodness of God in everyday people's lives, so that we could be mutually encouraged. And I want to thank you for watching us, and I want to encourage you also to please like and share, and invite your friends to like and share these videos and our channel. I really want to strongly emphasize, if those of you who are watching and sharing, if you could make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. We're trying to bring more traffic over to that section of our platforms. So God bless you guys, and I'm excited, as I am every single time we record, to introduce our guest today, which is Jessica Poche.
Woo-woo, hey.
Now, why don't you tell us about your upbringing? Give us a brief, just set the stage for us so that we can understand those climactic events in your life where God has especially moved in your life.
Okay. So I was born in a single family home with my mom. It's crazy because when I was about 3 or 4 years old, my parents separated, and I remember their separation till this day.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember being in the back of the car, my mom driving off, and my dad in the middle of the street, and they were arguing. So that's something that played in my mind. But anyway, so I grew up in a single family home with my mom, who took care of us. And it was me and my older sister until I was about 12. Then we had another baby in the house. And so I have 2 siblings with my mom. Okay. And my mom is a believer. She taught us the love of God. She led us to Christ and taught us about Christ when we were kids. So I was about 4 years old. My older sister was about 5 years old. And she talked to us about God, led us to God. But of course, I don't take that and say, I was saved when I was 5 or 3. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't do that. Yeah. But was just the introduction. And as she led us through different activities in our life, which I'll get into, but she just set that example. And she taught us, as a Christian, this is how you treat people. And as a Christian, this is how you should live. This is what you shouldn't watch everything. You shouldn't listen to everything, and she kept us in church. And this was all through going through poverty. We were homeless before. I remember we were in high school even, and my mom would drive us from LA to San Bernardino just to keep us in the same school because we moved so much. And I was born in Long Beach, but when people say oh, where are you from? I don't really give them a direct answer.
Same here. I say
Right?
all of Southern California, baby.
Exactly. Cali. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I just say, between Riverside County, San Bernardino County, and LA County, like that's just what it was. We bounced around a lot. And from that, I just saw the faithfulness of God in my mom. Because even though we were struggling, even though we didn't have a home, she stayed committed to God. She kept us in church. It doesn't matter the drive. So whether it's driving from LA, one time we lived in Hemet, she would drive from Hemet to keep us in the same church. And so the church that I was in was the most consistent place of my life.
So why don't you talk about, it went from just kind of having this knowledge of God as a kid to, you know what, I have this personal relationship with Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have moments in my life with that.
Okay.
Nothing has been just 100% concrete. There has been steps.
Okay.
So the first step was about 16 years old.
Sorry.
That's okay. The first step was about 16 years old. And during that time, I realized my walk was not true. Even though I was going to church, grew up in church, there were things that I were doing that was not conducive to Christian behavior, right? So God revealed that to me, and I just had this heart for God and this heart for the word. And I was like in high school, going in the library, studying the word. We had like these old school ugly computers when they first came out, and they were like white, and they had this big old blue back. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought we were so cool because we got those at our school.
Those are the Macintosh
Yes,
computers.
yes.
Yeah.
So we had those, and I would go on the little Mac and look up words, the concordance, and try to break down scripture.
Okay.
And I was doing that, and then if I knew people were Christians at school, I would tell them like, "Hey, you got to be living for Jesus." Like I was just real hardcore for Christ when I was about 16. But then that kind of drifted out a little bit. There was a time when me and my mom didn't have the best relationship, and so at about 20, I left the home and I actually went to live with my dad for like the first time. And that was good and bad.
Had you kept in touch with your dad throughout the years?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Did you know where he was?
No, I found him. So on that same Mac computer, when I was 16, I was going through some stuff. So when I was younger, I actually went through some sexual abuse. When I was older, there was things that was happening with guys I didn't understand and some attention I didn't like. And I was like, dang, I wish I had a dad because my dad can teach me what to do. So then I found him. So I searched for him. So the same time I was looking up scripture, I was actually searching on the computer.
How do you
for him.
search for him?
I was, like back in the day, you could just put in a name and then it comes up. So he just came up.
Are you serious? Like what came up? Like his credit report or what?
No, just his number and his address.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
And so I found him and my grandfather, and they weren't even that far away, just a couple of cities over.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, I need my dad. So I reached out. And it just so happened that through child support, we got a letter, and he was trying to reach out to me. So I got his number that way as well. And when I found it, I talked to my sister. I was like, so how about you call this number? Because I don't want to call and get in trouble. So you call this number. And then she called it, and we were able to reach him, and I was able to see him and different things like that. But the relationship did not last.
No.
So it was just like a quick here and there, high and by. And
how long did you stay with him?
When I was 20, so that was when I found him when I was 16. When I was 20, I stayed with him for about 6 months, something like that.
Okay. And then you realized this is not going to work.
What it did for me is settled in my soul certain things about me that I didn't understand where it came from. Because I was like, why am I the only one that loves math? And why am I the only one that loves this and this? Where does this even come from? And so when I was with him, I found out more about myself, but then I also got to see him. And I was like, okay, yeah, he's an amazing guy. He loves to have fun and stuff like that. But there were some character issues and some flaws that weren't protected for me. And I was like, okay, you're not really there like you need to be. And that showed throughout. And I hate to sound like that. Like, no, it's like I'm bashing, but it's real.
It explains your childhood kind
exactly.
of.
Yeah. Because he wasn't there. Even after that, it would be if I was going to see my dad, I would have to go find him. So he lived in San Diego before, so I would drive to San Diego. He lived in Riverside, I drove to Riverside. He lived in Moreno Valley, I drove to Moreno Valley. It was me. It was never an initiative where he would come see me. And then unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. And that grief was different because he wasn't there. So the fact that he's not here now was no difference because he never have been there. You know, I had to beg him for relationship. So that was like my search with him. Unfortunately, I didn't get what I desired. But in the midst of my search for him, God revealed to me that he did the separation on purpose. And it was actually a form of protection for me to not have grown up under him. So I'm grateful, even though it hurts, I'm still grateful. Yeah. And so that was like 16, 20 years old when I lived with my dad. That was my first time separating from the church I grew up in.
Okay.
And I was just everywhere. I was away from my mom. I'm living with my dad. All kind of stuff is going on in his household. And I just feel broken, you know? And so I remember going to this church, my cousin's church. And I was leaving the church because I was like, God, if they're not going to take time to allow you to move the way you want to move, then I don't need this. I don't need somebody just to be in the church just on a schedule. I need them to be open for you to move. And so I was leaving. And then I remember God was like, go back. And I just heard his voice so clearly, go back to the church. And I was just like, but no, I'm not going to go back with those people, you know, because they're just so on the schedule.
So what was it that was happening that was kind of bothering you? Was it just seemed like people were going through the motions?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes, with no spirit.
Okay.
Or you can see, let's say worship is like high and heavy. You know, you have one of them Hillsong moments, like, you know, where it's high and heavy and people want to reach out and praise God and then they'll just cut it off and be like, okay, go to the next thing.
Okay.
And it was like, come on, have that moment. God wants to have those moments, you know?
Yeah.
And it bothered me. And I think it bothered me now I think about it because I needed it so bad. I was in a broken time of my life. I needed that fellowship, not only with God, but with people. And I needed that surrounding.
Was it a Calvary Chapel or what? No. And just so everybody knows, I'm a Calvary Chapel guy. But that is something that I have noticed also.
Yeah.
And it's not because I want to be this Pentecostal guy, because I the church that I got saved at was a Pentecostal church.
Okay.
And you know, so I know the whole thing, and I have dear friends that are just beautiful brothers and sisters in the Lord that are Pentecostal, and I appreciate the order in the body, because Paul writes in Corinthians specifically that, hey, if you have not love and you're doing all these things, you're just clanging cymbals and stuff, because you see that too. And I saw that a lot when I was in this particular denomination that was a Pentecostal denomination. But then on the flip side, like, you know, I don't think the fellowship is supposed to be so sterile.
Yes.
There should be a fluidity about it, because, you know, God is not just moving in one person's life that stands up there. That's not to say that any one person can disrupt the flow of fellowship. You know, we're following an order. The order is Acts chapter 2, verse 42, which is, and they continued in the apostles' doctrine, the prayer, the fellowship, and the breaking of bread. So that's the order. But notice how there's just 4 things there. And it's like one little sentence that doesn't mean that, you know, we have to plan or fit that all in this hour and a half time frame schedule every week. You know, so I appreciate, there's a pastor in Whittier. His name's John Schaefer. I know sometimes he watches the show, but it's the church that Judy comes from, and it's a Calvary Chapel called First Love, and he is one of those guys that'll just off the bat. I remember one time I visited, and he knew that at that time I was doing like spoken word poetry. He goes, "Hey, there's Miles from this church over there in Fontana, and Miles, why don't you come up here and share a poem with us?" And this is not like some little church.
Exactly.
And I'm like, Because, usually you find that more flexibility in smaller churches that are
Yes.
just kind of going with the flow.
Yeah.
And in the bigger churches, this is like a show.
Yes.
It's like a concert.
Yes.
You go up, go,
Exactly.
go.
Yep.
This was that size of a church.
Yeah.
And he was like, why don't you just come up? And it was a long walk to the front. I was like, you sure about this, man? And I loved that though.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember stuff like that. So I understand what you're saying.
Yes, because it's real. I believe, God is big. He's huge. And sometimes you need those moments. I know up the hill, Abundant Living, High Desert, Pastor Mark Graham, he's like that. There were moments where service just went and broke out in worship. And then people's heart was just healed. I know for me, and it touched me too, and it wasn't like all the time, but every once in a while it would get off a schedule.
Yeah.
And just let God move.
Yeah.
And that's how it was at that church. And it wasn't Calvary Chapel, no, not at all. But it was just so, just rigorous. And then God told me, I just heard his voice, like, just go back. And then I went back. So I walked back in the church. And the pastor says these exact words: we're going to get off of schedule. I heard the Lord tell me that he's tired of us doing the same thing, so I'm going to do something different. And then he just sets a whole tone of worship. And that's when I learned that God listens. He hears me. I can pray and he hears me and he directs my steps and I can hear from him, know?
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful moment in my life where it was like, wow, the living word is real.
Yeah.
And he's speaking to me and directing me and he understands my concerns, even that.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, watch me move, even in your concern.
You know what I think is so awesome about that story is that a lot of people, just in my years of being in ministry, in leadership formats, a lot of people who they become disgruntled with how the leadership of the church is doing things. And so instead of doing things like that, they'll cause a division.
Yes.
They'll be like, they'll start murmuring to their neighbor and be like, oh, here we go again, and criticizing instead of just like, in their hearts, really kind of like saying, Lord, you know what? This is your church.
Yes.
Please do something about it. Yeah. And when we take care of what's on the Lord's heart, he takes care of what's on our hearts.
Yes.
And so, I think in that moment, you could have been divisive. You could have been one of those murmurers, but you were just kind of like, you know what, man, Lord, if they're just going to continue doing this, I feel like you want to do something else. Yeah. They're not hearing it. Maybe this isn't the place for me then. Yeah. And then he had to tell you, why don't you go back?
Exactly.
I'll take care of that for you. You know what I'm saying? Yes. And so I think that's a wonderful approach that every Christian should take towards what's happening in their church.
I agree.
Trusting the Lord, praying for the leadership.
Yes.
And seeking God for because you weren't in leadership at that church, right?
I was just a guest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and I think that's important because the body of Christ is not just made up of pastors,
yes,
or deacons or ushers or whatever. It's made up of every single part of the body.
Yeah.
And God is speaking to all of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's go from there then.
Okay.
So now you realize that God is he's like speaking to you. How does this change your walk with him?
It increased my prayer life. So before, when I was younger, I knew that I could tell him anything, but this moment was just like, you care. That's what I learned. You care. I'm like, I know you heard me at first. I know I could tell you anything at first, but at this moment, I recognize how much he cared about me. And that even though I made bad decisions, which I did after that, I got in a relationship I shouldn't have been in. It was horrible with the unbeliever, all that stuff. But even in those moments, I would just hear him say how much he loved me. And Like, Jessica, you have to be obedient. Absolutely. Get out of this relationship, but I love you. And he taught me about sin. Like, okay, you're sinning because you love it. So cut it out and follow me. Like, that's the things I would get. But again, it was during those, and it was a couple of years. So I was 20, 21, about 22, where he was just like wooing me with his loving kindness. He was following me, and just saying, I love you and I care. And that just took my relationship with him to another dimension. So first it was learning the word, then it was, living the word and having those interactions with the word, and then coming to realizing, like, God, you actually care about me, and then I started going back to college. I was in my 20s, and I learned about Paul Washer.
Oh, man. The video games I destroyed because of Paul Washer.
And
John real quick. I remember, oh man, it must have been like 2009, and I was working and I was spending my money because I was single. I had never even met Judy yet, and I was buying all kinds of video games and single kid stuff. And I got a hold of one of Paul Washer's teachings. And he was like, "You young man of God, take those video games and crush them under your feet." And I was like, yeah. I wish I never did that. I love Paul Washer though, but that was a little too much. So you have this legit walk with God.
Yeah.
There's a passion in your heart for the things of God.
Yep.
Tell us about how your husband came into the picture.
Okay, so at Abundant Living, and I used to take these little classes for success as a Christian person, basically. And so it was called Crosswalk. That was a class. And it was a progressive class where you kept the same people in your class, but you had different instructors. And then you graduated at different levels. And then you did a big graduation at the end. And they just taught you the word, basically, and how to live for Christ and different things like that. And so this is going to sound so horrible. So me and my mom, because my mom was going there before me. That was the only other church I had been to after that I was a member of after growing up in the church that I was at from a child. And so my mom was in this class with me, and we were in, I forgot which level of classes, but we were taking a test. And there's this guy who comes in late for the test, and he's like, oh my gosh. And so we're like, okay, so we're cheating at church, giving him the answers.
Oh my goodness.
I like to say we wanted to make sure he won. We were helping him succeed. So me and my mom were like, okay, just mark this. And we're like cheating for him and helping him because he was late, because we didn't want him to have to take it over again. Oh, wow. And so that was like our first introduction. Then I saw him again when we did a graduation, and he was late, and we said a couple of words. And then I was part of singles ministry, and he was part of singles ministry. And he invited me, this is going to sound so horrible, but he invited me to his house, me and my family to his house for Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
And I went there, and that was in the end of like 2003, 2004. We went there, and I didn't leave. That's why I said it sound horrible. Nothing happened. We didn't do nothing.
Okay.
Nothing happened. But I just didn't leave because we had this connection. And it was just so cool. And this became my boy, my friend, my ride or die. Like, I was just over there, and he was 11 years older than me. So I was over his house. I didn't have one. I was staying with my parents. So we were just connected though at the hip. Okay. When we were at church, anybody knew. If they were looking for me, they'd ask him. If they were looking for him, they'd ask me. Like, we were just connected. And so our relationship as friends just went kind of up and down. Sometimes I was like, okay, you're not trying to live the way I'm trying to live, so I'm gonna just cut you off. And then we'd always come right back together. And so in 2012, I was going through some stuff. Had just graduated from college and was homeless, working at my school and working up the hill and just struggling a little bit. So I was kind of sleeping in my car for a second. Wow. A lot of people don't know that, but I was sleeping in my car. And so me and him ended up reconnecting. And
did he know that you were sleeping in the car?
Yes.
He did?
Yeah. And I'm not going to tell his business, but he was going through some stuff too.
Okay.
But yeah, and then eventually he allowed me to sleep on his couch because he had a place and I was able to find refuge there for a little bit. And so I'm working, handling my business, and then we disconnect again and we stop talking for a few months. And when we start talking again, we talk for like 4 hours on the phone, which is something we didn't really do. We would do it in person, but we wouldn't do it over the phone. And then he talked to me again and he was like, you know what? I think we should get married. And I was like, shut up, whatever, you know.
But were you guys in a relationship at that time?
No. This has been friendship all this time.
Wow.
Right. And I had brought it up before because I'm like, okay. But he was like, no, I'm not interested. So I was like, okay. But excuse me. But he was like, no, I think we should get married. I thought he was playing. So I was like, okay, well, whatever, shut up. And I just, leave it alone. And then he was like, no, for real, I think we should get married. I was like, okay, whatever. And so then we saw each other again. We spent like the whole day together. And then he made it known that he was pretty serious to pursue a relationship. So let me give you a timeline. We were not talking. We were not talking for about maybe 6 to 8 months. And then we start talking in April. May, I guess you could say we kind of dated, but he was like, I think you should get married. So we're like, okay, well, all right, well, then let's just do it. So then May, and then June 24th, we actually got married.
Wow.
So it was a very quick timeline.
How long had you guys been friends?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we got married 2014. We met at the end of I think it was the end of 2004. We met the end of 2004 and we got, my math ain't adding up. And then my math is not adding up. We met in 2004. Yeah. And we got married 2014.
Okay.
So it was 10 years before we actually got married. Yeah.
And in that time, that 10 years, there was communication off and on.
Yeah.
And what do you think that was? Was that because maybe both of you guys were fighting what was the inevitable, or
no,
it was just because of things going on in each of your lives, or what was it?
He was fighting.
It was
him fighting. I
Why?
was willing.
Why do you think he was fighting?
Now that I look back on it, I think and now that we're kind of going into a different segment, I think he knew that he was dealing with being sick.
Oh.
And he didn't want me to have that journey with him.
Wow.
So that's why now I look back and I think that's the reason. But excuse me. He used to say I was immature because that was an 11-year difference. So he was like, you're too young, you're immature, whatever, and pushed it away. But it's like anybody saw it. When we walked in a room together, people are like, oh, you're going to be married. We went to a grocery store one time and these strangers looked at us and were like, you guys are going to be married. And we was like, whatever, like, like leave us alone. It's not going to be that. But that was just, you saw our love for each other. Just by being together. Not to say we didn't date in between time with other people, but he just
because that's a long time.
Yeah. So he wasn't. He just wasn't for it.
So tell me about when you guys got married.
Oh my gosh, it sucked.
I did not expect that response.
I know you did it. But let me explain.
Okay.
We very good friends, right? So when you spend that much time with a friend, you learn different patterns of behaviors and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so then when it came to living in the same home together, it was just a whole different story because now you really get to see this person every day. Every day. Yeah. And I always tell people who want to rush into marriage, like, no, take your time. Because once you are married, there is no hiding all your flaws. I mean, everything is exposed. Yeah. And so I was more prepared for it. He was a little, and that's just real.
I think that's how it is.
And he just wasn't. Even though he was older and he dealt with different, heartaches and stuff like that. And so for me, I was preparing for marriage because I always wanted to be married. Okay. So I would talk to people who are older And I'm like, please give me wisdom on how to be a good woman. Let me prepare ahead of time before I get married.
Yeah.
Different things that used to irritate me. This was like starting from high school.
Yeah.
I remember people would tap on stuff, and I used to get like so irritated, like, oh, would you stop that tapping? And then I learned like, no, I need to control myself. And then people would say like those little things you need to get rid of because your spouse is going to do stuff that irritates you.
Yeah.
So learn how to deal with it now.
Yeah.
So even at that age, I was working on that. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let stuff I can't control bother me. And so now the person can tap right next to me all day. I don't care. They could make beats in a whole album by tapping, I don't care. Because I'm not going to let it bother me. And so I really prepared for marriage because I wanted to make sure I was a Proverbs 31 woman and that I was a blessing to him.
Yeah.
And so he didn't do as much preparation.
Yeah. Guys are like, she's the one.
That's it.
That's it. I got nothing else, but she's the one. You can have nothing in the bank. You can be, and she's the one.
Yes.
That's what it was with me. And I learned along the way, No, I think what was monumental for me in establishing a proper foundation for a marriage, because the building of it is going to have its delays, it's going to have its challenges, you're going to have to deconstruct to construct.
Yes.
But as long as you have a good foundation, it's going to last.
Yes.
And it's going to be stable.
Yes.
And so I think our foundation was set in the fact that, hey, look, if marriage is something we're pursuing, divorce is not an option.
Yes.
But only people who resolve to treat marriage for what it is can say things like that.
Yes.
And because if you understand what marriage is, it's not just, hey, we live together and it's legit. That's not what it is. It's a combining of souls. It's God bringing two people together to the point where Jesus says, what God has brought together, let no man tear asunder.
Exactly.
And so, that was a thing that we had to understand.
Yeah.
And then we had to go through premarital counseling.
Yes.
And that's where all the foundation for me was laid. And I found out she's much more prepared than I am for this, because there are things I'm learning barely about myself right now, you know? So that's how it is.
Yes. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I think as long as one is prepared, we're okay. If two are not, then that's when.
Yeah. So so just that, is that why it sucked?
But it was the adjustment part,
Yeah.
right? And so he wasn't the most sharing. I feel so bad, like, because I feel like I'm talking about him. But he just wasn't. He wasn't the most lenient. He was still more so like, this is my territory. This is mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I love though is this. Even as friends, we would talk about marriage, just regular conversation, not about being married, but just about marriage. And so we already knew with us, we already understood. I really believe in kind of like old school roles to a certain degree. So I believe in the woman taking care of the home, and different things like that. He believed the man should be the provider and the protector and different things like that too. So we really already established that through friendship. And then we also established no divorce. We already knew that was our heart. Like, there would be no divorce here, so that was already something that was established. And it was just the adjustment period. When we first got married, it was just a little rough because it's like, oh my gosh, we're adjusting. We're dying to ourselves. We're becoming one. And it just was not a comfortable situation. And that was June 2014 was we got married. And so for a couple of months, it was that tug of war. And I really just believe it was more so with him, whatever it was he was dealing with. I'm not trying to put his business out there, but it was whatever he was dealing with that created that barrier. Yeah. But then, like, I have to put a plug in here. It's so amazing to marry a man who knows God. Not just a man who goes to church or who may be religious or may do the actions, but who has a relationship and knows God. Because God would wake him up in the middle of the night. And sometimes he'd turn over, he'd be like, oh, I need to treat you better. Or it would be like random moments where he's just like, oh, I need to do better by you. And it was like, okay, thank you. Our
It's funny
stranger.
because I know
See?
what that is. Yeah.
Ah, see?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and strangers would do it too. Like strangers, I remember one time in particular, because it's happened a couple times, but we were feeding a homeless person who came up to us. We were about to get some food. A homeless person was right there. So we were like, do you want some food? And the homeless person came and he told him, he was like, you better take care of her. Like he started like speaking into my husband's life. And I was like, let me back up because this is like a warning. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But like, it was just God getting his, not to say he was a bad guy because he wasn't. It was just that adjustment where he had to open up his heart again to just receive the love. And that is exactly what happened.
Wow.
And when I tell you,
So that was a definitive moment for him or what?
that I believe so.
Wow.
But
okay.
I know there was other little things that had
Sure.
happened,
Yeah.
but God just kept dealing with him. And what I would do was, I don't believe in nagging. I hate nagging. I think nagging is the most irritating thing a person can do, especially a woman, because I'm a woman and I don't want women to be known as naggers, right? But with him, I wouldn't nag. I would go into worship. So we would have like arguments or have, frustration in the home as we were building. And I would just go alone in a room and turn on my worship and cry out to God and pray for him. And in that, God just started changing his heart. And when I tell you, it became the most beautiful, God, the most beautiful, amazing relationship in the world. It was exactly what I expected marriage to be. It was my dream and my hope of what I wanted marriage to be. And it just took a couple of months. But there was a particular conversation we had one day. And he was like, I don't ever want to treat you as common. He was like, let's not ever treat each other as common. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, and he used to always say this, like, give me my flowers while I yet live. That was like his saying. And so we vowed to each other to pour into each other everything that we feel. It doesn't matter how vulnerable it seems. It doesn't matter what it is. Just let's give each other 100% of our love and let's become one. Because and that's what I learned, just because you're married doesn't mean you're actually becoming one. You can still have the title of marriage, but you guys are both just doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember that conversation. He was like, babe, we actually became one. And I was like, yes, we made it. And again, it just became this patient, loving, amazing relationship, marriage that we had. Yeah.
There's a handful of guys that I know that in recent years have, had to go through a divorce.
Yeah.
And, it's one thing that I notice is they're like, I don't even know what happened. And they just want to blame it on menopause or whatever, right? She changed. But, and I haven't gone through that, so I'm not going to make fun of them or anything like that. But one thing that I can see for sure identify there is, how could you not know what happened? Yeah. And until after the fact, that's what they say, is that I didn't know anything was wrong. And then they say, but now that, because for instance, one time, I think one of these guys, we were in a men's group and we're going through Disciplines of a Godly Man. Yeah. That book, I forgot, Kent Hughes. It's a really good book. Yeah. And he was like, when I was going through the divorce, I kept asking myself, what happened? I did not see this coming. And then once he was able to go through this book and realize what the disciplines of a godly man are, he realized that it was him. Wow. That it was him not actually loving his wife. Yeah. And that looks not just one way. It's not just saying every once in a while, hey, I love you, or thank you. Exactly. It's dwelling with your wife with understanding. Yeah. It's a lot of things. It's laying your life down sacrificially. That means if she wants to give you dinner on a paper plate, then take the dinner on the paper plate and be thankful. Yeah. And it means so a myriad of other things also. Yeah. And I think when we look at marriage for what it should be and what it is biblically, you know, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not to say that the learning curve isn't difficult, because it requires dying to self.
Yes.
On both ends.
Yes.
And you know, but once you get that established, then accepting the things that you can't change about
Yes.
them becomes much easier.
Yep.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it's like they don't really gotta change that. I gotta absorb that. I gotta
Yes.
embrace that, you know?
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that he was sick.
Yeah.
And that he was possibly battling that.
Yeah.
Did you know he was sick?
No.
You didn't know he was sick?
No.
Did you know he was sick when your guys' marriage started flourishing?
No. Well, as it started flourishing, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because in the midst of all that with the marriage,
Mm-hmm.
we were in and out of the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he had gotten he got real sick, and it was his liver. And so we were going in the process of having a liver transplant, and we had to go to all these hospitals all the time, and he was sick a lot. And it was a shaky time. So we were working on our new marriage, you know, trying to establish the home and the family life, also caring for him. And so in the midst of that time, I had lost my job. It was actually a wrongful termination where they totally did me dirty.
Really?
Yes. And that was God too. Sometimes you don't recognize when God is working because it hurts so bad of what's done. But then in the end, you're like, okay, God, I needed you to do this because if you wouldn't have done that, this wouldn't have happened. And that's how I feel with them, because they totally lied on me. And then I rebutted that lie. I was like, no, here's proof. Like, your lie didn't work. And then they're like, oh, well, we're just going to let you go. Like, that's exactly how they said. And I was like, okay. And it was so upset because I was my husband was sick. And even though he was working odds and ends here and there, he couldn't work. That was my only form of income. And they were kind of getting a little messy, not wanting me to go to his appointments, stuff like that. And so that was my form of income, and it got cut.
Oh, wow.
And so now it's like, okay, so we're not working, we're struggling, like there's no money coming in, and he's just getting worse, he's getting sick, and so we're in and out of the hospital, going through different things. And what I just don't believe in leaving a loved one. Like, I'm loyal. That's my husband. If my husband's in the hospital, I'm in the hospital. And so if he was in there for a week or 2 weeks, my bed, that little ugly, uncomfortable bed, chair that goes to bed, I would be right there. Yeah. I learned all his medicines. I learned how to read his blood reports so I can understand what the doctors are talking about. I learned whatever he was allergic to, like just how to be his advocate, you know, in the hospital. And so we were struggling. We were just struggling back and forth with his sickness. And the thing with it, though, he knew he was going to pass away. Which I know we were going to get to that, but he would talk to me. I'm so grateful for this man of God, because I watched the little things that he did to prepare me for the day that would actually be his homegoing, you know, and he would sit down and he'd talk to me, and he'd have this real relationship, and I mean, these real talks with me. And he'd say, you know what, I'm not going to be here. Like, this is what you need to do, you know, and you're going to be okay. Like, he would sit and have conversations with me and say, make sure you have the insurance, you know, taken care of, and different things like that, which I didn't get to because we were newlyweds going through all this stuff. And we just didn't get to update our insurance, different things. So we'll get into that, I guess, later.
So how long were you guys married when all this started happening?
When his sickness started declining and happening, it was about 6 months.
Oh, okay.
And then it just really started just going down. Totally. We were married in total for 1 year and 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like in and out, very fast, very fast. Wow. I didn't expect it, but I'm grateful for it. I am. It was the most amazing experience that I could have went through. That has actually been part of my life transformation process of knowing God in a more deeper fashion and having a love and understanding for God in a deeper fashion. Because as we're going back and forth and as he's sharing with me that he's going to pass and he's having these talks with me and I'm like, okay, whatever, cut it out. God's going to heal you. You know, you're going to be okay. He's playing sermons. There is one sermon, E.V. Hill preached his wife's funeral. And my husband used to play that message in the home. And I believe it was to prepare me. I really do. And then there was this song I used to sing over him. One time he was in extreme pain. And he was like, sing my song. And I would sing this song over him. And then it would just relieve his pain. And he was like, that's the song I want you to sing at my funeral. And it was just like, okay, you know, like you ain't going nowhere, but if that's what you need, okay, you know, it was just this, it was this crazy, most broken, hard process I have ever experienced with God's hand all in it. And as his health was declining, and we were in the hospital, we were going through the process of a liver transplant. We dealt with some crazy doctors who were totally rude and disrespectful at some of these amazing big hospitals who just did us dirty.
Oh, wow.
I mean, dirty. From changing reports as far as declining him for the liver transplant, for just a lot of stuff was happening. And I remember one day he did not, there's two instances, one I'm gonna share. One day he didn't remember who I was. And that was crazy. Just a crazy experience. He thought he was still married to his ex-wife and that he was cheating on her with me. And he did not know me. And it was just this, crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy. Whew. Hard situation. That was hard. And then later on, as we were going hospital to hospital, because we went through so many hospitals, we went to one and he was bedridden. He had the feeding tube. He was very weak. He had lost a lot of weight. And I was laying in the hospital with him and he woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't really in his right mind because your liver, I learned so much about your liver and how we need to take care of our bodies because our liver is so important. It takes away the toxins and it actually regulates our hormones and our mental status, our, bowel movements, everything. Like our liver does a lot of things. And so there were times where he just wasn't coherent and he couldn't talk to me. And he was in that state where he had the feeding tube. And then somebody woke me up in the middle of the night. And it was him. He had took the feeding tube out of his mouth. And whatever was coming out of it was dripping all down his shirt. And he was just like having a conversation with me and how he wanted to go home. And what I would do is this, while my husband was down, if he couldn't speak for himself and he was down, then I would stand up for him and speak on his behalf. But when I know he had clarity of mind and he was where he was supposed to be, then I would go back down and allow him to handle his business and just back him up. And so in this situation, he was in his right mind. And he's just like, I want to get out of here. And the reasons why he was like, they're not giving me what I need to succeed. I'm trying to say, can we rebuild me? Can you give me weights so I can work out? Can we do something? Can you take me outside just to get fresh air? Can you do something for me? And the doctors would never keep their word. And he's just like, I'm tired of this. So I got with him. We spoke to another doctor and I let him speak. And he's just like, I want to be dismissed, or what do you say?
Released. Or discharged.
Discharged. I want to be discharged from the hospital. And then the doctors looked at me and I was like, if that's what he says he wants to do, then I'm backing it up. And they got upset with me, but I'm like, but I know he's in his clarity of mind. So absolutely. If he's sick but he wants to go, we're going to let him go. We got out and he was like on this time clock. And he wanted to visit so many people. It was crazy because we left the hospital. He was like, I want to go see my mom. We went to go see his mom. He spent some time there. And then he was like, I want to go see my sister and her kid and different things. So he went to go see her. He went to go see his adopted daughter. I say adopted daughter. It was his daughter of love, not by blood, but definitely his baby girl. He helped raise her since she was an infant. So that was his daughter, and who I love too. So he was like, I need to go see them. So we went to go see them. And he made these different travels to different places. And I didn't recognize it then, but I recognize now, like, he was like, my time is short. I need to see people, for the last time. And the last holiday we spent together was Thanksgiving. So it was crazy because he was so big. Now he's like this amazing husband, right? And he's a weak, but he's like this most amazing husband. And he's like, let's dress the same for Thanksgiving and let's do this dinner and let's do that. And I was like, babe, no, it's too much. We just got the hospital. It's too much. He's like, no, I will do whatever I need to do for you, whatever. He's just pouring out his love. I'm like, babe, no, it's just too much. And so we're in the home and we're sitting on our couch. He had a big couch and I was on one end, he was on the other end. And I was feeding him some oranges. And our kitchen was right by our living room. It was separated by a wall. And so I was feeding him some oranges. And then he's like, he called me from the kitchen. And he's like, babe, who are you? And I was like, oh my gosh, he forgot who I was. Like, that's the one in my head. He forgot who I was again. Lord, please don't let me go through this pain again. This hurts, And I was like, I'm your wife, Jessica. Da, da, da. And he's like, I know who you are. And it's like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Okay.
Oh, man.
And he's like, but who are you? And I was like, I'm, a child of the Most High God, da, 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 whatever, said the little Christian speech. And then I walk away and then he says, he came back. Oh no, I came back, sat down and he looked across from me on the couch and he's like, babe, do you know who you are? And I looked at him and I was like, okay, this was like one of them moments. Who was it? Samuel in the Bible, where it was like when God was speaking. And I was like, okay, this is really God speaking through him. And it's a deeper question than what I'm willing to answer right now. And I just told him, I said, no, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And then we waited a little bit. And then I said, all right, babe, are you ready to go to bed? And then he said, I am ready to go, which was weird because he doesn't talk like that. And so I was like, all right. So I'm walking him to the room, helping him up. And we have this big old tall Paul Bunyan bed. And so I'm like helping him get in the bed because he had to sleep in the bed. I don't know why, but he had to sleep up there of all places. So I'm helping him up from the back and it's like, okay, babe, let's get up, And then he wasn't responding. I said, okay, so I'm going to help you out. So I went to the other end of the bed to get his hands to help him up that way. And then I'm noticing that he's not responsive. And it's like, some blood is kind of coming out his mouth. Hopefully it's not too graphic, but blood is kind of coming out his mouth and his eyes are just doing this weird thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's not responding. So I go back to the other end of the bed. And this is so God because he's a thick, solid man. Even though he lost weight, he was still solid. And I went and I picked him up off the bed, laid him gently on the ground. And I'm like, that was only the Lord that I had that strength to do that.
Wow.
And I'm like, not knowing what to do. And I'm praying. I'm like, God, what do I do? And I just heard very clearly, call 911. I was like, thank you, Jesus. That's so obvious, And so I'm calling 911 and they're guiding me to doing heart compressions on him, and I'm just watching him and he's not responding. And so then finally they send the officer who came and then they took over for me. And I went in like logical thinking mode, like, okay, if the ambulance comes, I need to clear our driveway. So I started moving cars out the way, getting stuff together so that they have easy access. And they worked on him. And while they worked on him, when they finally got there, I was sitting in my car and just praying and crying like, God, but no, like, I thought he was going to be okay. I was getting all these words from people, words from God, from people like, oh, he's going to be fine. He's going to be healed. He's going to be okay. And my faith was even in that. I'm like, he's going to be fine. He's going to be okay, And I'm like, God, he's going to be okay, right? Like, that's the promise. Like, he's going to be okay. And then I hear one of the workers say, holy S, he's breathing. And I was like, okay, Jesus, like, it's going to be okay, you know? Mm-hmm. And so then they take him to the hospital, finally get to the hospital. And I get to go see him. And he's in the emergency room. And he was there for 3 days. And I'm visiting him. I wouldn't leave his side. Like, even though the hospital was up the street from the home, I would not leave. And I would just sing over him and minister to him. And I know the enemy hates that. I know he hates it, because there was this nurse who, while I was singing and praying over him, she was like, you are bothering him and you shouldn't be doing whatever. Like, she was just really attacking. I had to be like, yo, this is my husband in his time of grief. Like, let me do what I'm supposed to do as a wife, basically. Mm-hmm. And so they're going through all this process. I'm not going to get into details, but I'm with him. And then one day I was like, okay, babe, I'm going to go take care of myself, because he used to get on me because I was so focused on taking care of him. I wouldn't really take care of me. Mm-hmm. And he'd be like, you need to take care of yourself. And so I was like, all right, the second day, like, okay, I'm going to go take care of myself, so I'll be back. So I left the hospital. I went to my house, but I didn't want to be at my house. So then I went to my mom's house down the hill. When I went down the hill, and I was just praying to God, and my husband's brother called me and was like, you know, he's losing a lot of blood. The doctors want to know what you want to do. And I said, I want them to do everything they can to keep him alive. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And so then I get up and I just have this moment with God. And I'm like, all right, Daddy, what do you want to do? Like, that's the reality. This is where we are. What do you want to do? Whatever your will is, I am willing to deal with it, whatever it is. And sure enough, I got a call 3:00 that morning, and they were like, we tried to resuscitate him. His heart failed. And, your husband's gone. And so I was like, all right. And so I got dressed. I didn't tell nobody yet. I got dressed and I drove up the hill 3-4 o'clock in the morning by myself and just cried out to God. Went to the hospital. I wasn't able to see him yet. So my first reaction was, all right, where's your chapel? And I go to the chapel and I got on my knees. And the one thing I kept remembering was when David's child, when he and Bathsheba had the child, and the child was gonna pass, and he was crying out to God to heal the child. But then once the child actually passed away, then he took off his grieving clothes and was like, okay, and just kept moving, because that was just the will of God. Like, that story kept playing in my head. And I just bowed down before the little altar with the Bible on it. And I just started worshiping and praying. And I'm like, all right, this is your will. I want to say this. I know it's so much. It's so many details, but I want to say this because there was a time when he was in the hospital where I was on my driveway, and I had such a God moment, and our dog had ran away. And I'm at the driveway and I'm like, God, I don't know where this dog is. And I don't want to have to tell him now, like, oh, your dog is gone and you're sick and you're in the hospital, all this stuff. And it was just a lot. And God was like, all right, well, what would you do if I didn't give you your dog back? And I was like, okay, well, it's not that big a deal. I'm not, I didn't grow up with a dog, and it ain't that deep. You know what I mean? But I was like, but it would be awesome to have the dog back. But if not, okay, whatever. And then he was like, all right. And then we were going through with our house because of income. Like I talked about before, he's sick, going back and forth and out of the doctor's office. I became his IHSS representative, but they don't pay that much. They're paying minimum wage. So we didn't really have income. And he was like, so what if I take your home away? And I was like, I sat for a little bit. I was like, okay, well, I've been homeless before, God. So, I mean, if that's what you feel free to do, then, I mean, it's going to work out. I'm not worried about that. And then the third question, he said, what if I take your husband? And that took a little longer of an answer. And I sat there for a second and I was like, And I said, well, God, I've been single before. So if you see fit to allow something like this to happen, then it's just what it is. And I'm not saying he is the one who got my husband sick and he's the one, who did that, but he knew what was going to happen. And I was just like, so, I mean, whatever your desire is. And that was before that weekend of everything happening with him. And so fast forward, he passes, before his face in worship. And then it goes from there. The thing that I think was the hardest was I was already lost. It wasn't just my husband I lost like my closest friend. That was my boy.
Yeah.
He was the nut who would call me 2:00 in the morning and be like, what are you doing? I'm coming over and I'm picking you up. And we would just go have breakfast or just go drive somewhere out of the blue, just to go enjoy. We enjoyed each other. That was my boy. That was my friend. And so now he passed away. And I didn't get to do the insurance. And so now I'm this young widow with no income, no job, no insurance to cover the cost. I thank God for my church at the time who really rallied around me and helped me during that time period. But right after the service for his funeral, when I went home, I had to move because I couldn't stay in our house no more. We were already behind on our rent and I couldn't stay. So it was like, I did sing at his funeral. I sang his song at his funeral and we celebrated his life. Then I had extra hands there. So I was like, oh, can y'all help me pack? And it was like leaving straight from there to the house, packing up the house.
Wow.
And had to leave. Wow. And it was from that moment that I actually became homeless. And was living on my sister's couch, sleeping on my sister's couch, and had to move our stuff. And God was so gracious. Even in the move, the landlord was like, I will pay you $500 to move out by such and such a date. We were behind on our rent. But the landlord was like, here is a check. I would give you $500 if you get out at this time. And it was like, wow, who does that? Wow. And so that was just God's hand working on, helping me out. And so then I go to my sister's house. And again, I don't have anything. I lose basically everything. I had a pretty new car, lost my car, different stuff like that. I had our old cars that weren't working, just going through a lot of stuff. And I would wake up in the morning and seek God's face and journal. And then I would, and it was seeking his face was with journaling, reading the word and worship and prayer. Like, that's just what I did every morning, every night for like months, because after he passed, I felt in my heart a pain. It was like a knife was in my chest and I felt it every day. And I was like, all right, God, you tell us in your word that we have to grieve as one that has hope. So you have to teach me how to do that, And so I'm going through and I'm just seeking. I free fall. That's what I call it. I just free fall into God and was like, I don't know where to go from here. So you're just going to have to pick me up. And when I tell you this whole experience, as ugly, as hard, as painful as it was the most amazing thing I could have ever went through.
Wow.
Because it showed me God. And I watched my husband as he was in pain, as he was going through. I saw him connecting with God in ways that I wasn't sure about, And he was like, I want to go home. And that's what he said. Is it time to go home? Yeah, I want to go home. And I was like, dang, he really knows heaven is real. It's not a guess. It's not a question, For him, it's real. For him. And I was like, God, I want to know you like that. I want to know that when I leave here, I'm going to go see you for sure, and just watching him minister to nurses who were mean or doctors who were mean, and he'd still witness to them and different things like this. It just transformed my relationship with God to a whole nother level. That was a whole lot. Wow. But yeah.
Wow. I mean, that happened he passed away in 2015.
Yep.
2015.
Yep.
And so how did you I know you say you dive into the Lord, but what does that look like? Does that look like immersing yourself in going to church or reading the scriptures? And what does that look like? When you say to sorrow as those who have hope, like the scripture says exactly, we don't sorrow as those with no hope.
Yeah.
So how do you sorrow with hope?
It was trusting in Jesus.
Okay.
First of all. I know you said what did that look like? Definitely not going to church. And I hate to say it like that because at that time I couldn't go to church. I couldn't go to the physical building of a church. I'm not against it. I just could not at that time.
Right.
But it was a surrender. That's the best way I could say it. And I was like, God, I recognize my life is not my own. And I am trusting you with the most broken place, and I am releasing all control. Like, I don't even care anymore. Whatever you desire to do with me, I'm okay with. And I would spend time. It was more so prayer, worship, and I would dig in the word to learn who he was. I needed to know that God was really, really real. I needed to know that in my worst moment that he was not going to leave me. That he was stronger in those moments. And that's what it was. It was just trusting and relinquishing anything that could cause doubt and saying, all right, you're God. Let's see you be God in this, because this is the most broken place I've ever experienced, and being okay being broken and sharing whatever was on my heart. So the journaling, I would just share like, okay, God, this is how I feel. This is what's real. This is what's going on with me. And I was just honest going to God. And then with grieving as one that has hope, the hope, I know I said it's in Jesus, but it's just like, he says that he works all things together for our good, according to those who love him and are called to his purpose. And I knew I loved him. I knew I'm called to his purpose. And I'm like, you got to work this out. Something good has to come from here. And I have to know that he is with you. That is the hope, is knowing that this rock bottom pit is not going to be the rest of my life. That this is not it.
Yeah. And the scripture that you referred to there, just a few verses later, and I recently got to talk about this with my wife, Judy, and she lost her mother to cancer years ago. And so Judy, I think she knows the answer to the question because, she knows the scriptures. But as people grieve, they need to have these things reinforced.
Yes.
The hope of Christ needs to be reinforced in our lives every day. And the question she asked, well, heaven seems like it's a very big place. And will we know our loved ones? Will we see our loved ones? Where's that in the Bible? And, there's always the knee-jerk responses to that. Of course, it's heaven, all things will be revealed. But sometimes those answers are not satisfactory.
Yeah.
And in that little section of verses that you referred to in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul, just a few verses later, because he's talking to the Thessalonian church who is grieving the loss of loved ones that were a part of that church, because of persecution once Paul left.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of like, well, what's up? When's the Lord coming back? And they're asking questions like this. Yeah. Are they at a disadvantage because they died before Christ came back?
Yeah.
Which was a huge point that Paul was making with them. And so he says they're not at a disadvantage. Matter of fact, the dead will rise first. Yeah. What comes first is the resurrection, and then what I truly believe is being said there, the rapture will happen.
Yeah.
In the Greek, it says harpazo, catching away, and we will meet them in the clouds. It literally says, and we will be together with them in the clouds, and we will be with the Lord forever. Yeah. So he's saying that in context of what he's telling them. Yeah. Those who are not sorrowing as those with no hope, what they can be sure of is that their hope is this, that they will be together with them with the Lord forever.
Yes.
And nothing is going to stop that.
Yeah.
And so I was so thrilled. Like I was reading this and I was studying it like at 2:00 in the morning. And I was like, I finally have a satisfactory answer
Yeah.
for my wife, who I want her to have those things resolved in her heart,
Yes.
you know, because it's part of the grieving process.
Yes.
And I feel like I haven't been able to, you know, comfort her. And I was excited. I was like, I got it. It was like Eureka. And I wanted to go wake her up because it's 2:00 in the morning. And I was like, no, I can't be doing that to her, you know. But then she wakes up. She wakes up on her own, and you know, I'm just kind of lying there, and I just say, hey, are you like coherent?
Yeah.
Or are you just like sleepwalk? And she goes, what's up? And I tell her, I said, I finally got a good answer and the perfect verse for that question you have. Yeah. And so I share it with her, everything I just told you. And you know, she just smiles and she looks at me and she goes, you know what my mom used to always say? And I was like, what's that? She goes, I hope that we can all experience the rapture together. And I said, well, now look at what this verse says. We are.
Yeah.
We are. And even though I never got to meet Alice, I will be together with her forever. And we're going to be caught up, as it says in the cloud. And so, oh man, it's so wonderful to, and I'm glad I asked you about what does it look like, because maybe those who are grieving, maybe being among people who are not where you're at is not a healthy thing to do, because there are actual people there who are well-intentioned and will say some really dumb stuff.
Yes.
Like, I just lost my aunt.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just feel what you're feeling. My dog died.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, that's stupid.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so it's sometimes it's a wise thing to be alone with the Lord so that he can minister to you, because he does truly care about you. And he does leave the 99 to minister to the one. Yep. And so I'm glad that you said that, because you know, I think the genuine work that God is trying to do in every person is for the benefit of the body of Christ at large. Yeah. But he's working on the individual, and he's near to the brokenhearted. And so that person has to hear from the Lord. Yeah. Has to know that God cares to the point where he knows every hair on their head. Yeah. And I have to admit that I have not yet suffered as great a loss as that, or as great a loss as Judy did with her mom. Yeah. But I recognize that. Absolutely. And I think, you know, I think the scriptures make it clear about those who are grieving, those who are widows. Yeah. And how there is a special attention that is needed among widows. Yes. Now, you have created, or you're a part of. You created a ministry that is specific to widows, right? Yeah. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's called A Widow's Fight.
Okay.
And it's a widow's fight because when you are, for me, it was a fight in my grief. Because wasn't just grieving my husband, I was grieving our home, because I had lost everything. So it was a different fight, because I was dealing with financial issues and in grief. So it was, and single with no children, there's no help for me. I can't call an organization or say, okay, give me assistance.
Oh, wow.
There's no help.
So that's a specific dynamic that you experienced then.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have no kids.
No kids.
Wow.
So, oh no, you can't get any help.
Wow.
Any help with no kids. And I was like, wow, God. And I appreciate God, because me going through this, it opened up this compartment of compassion that I never had before. And I recognize, even in church, there's not really an attention to those who are widowed. And like the Bible talks about those who are widowed and fatherless a lot, like that he has a special heart for that.
Yeah.
So you may hear about the fatherless, but you don't hear about those who are widowed in the church. And I was like, when I would go to church, now that I was a widow, some of the pastors I knew would change their message to include me in it. But before then, there was no messages that I can pull on that would help minister to me. Because pastors don't talk about that. They talk about you not smoking, not drinking, not committing adultery. But no one sits and has a whole message really about those who are widowed. And so I was like, okay, God, wow, there's a need here. There's all these who are widowed who are not really being ministered to at church, who may be in my situation where they don't have children and they're just struggling. Like they're struggling by themselves and they don't know what to do. And my thing, this is how I live my life. I'm like, if I'm going to go through hell, then it's going to be hell with a purpose, God. So we're going to have to flip this and use it for a greater good, because I'm not just going to allow that to overcome me, you know? And so I'm like, if I had to experience this, I don't want other people to experience this. And so A Widow's Fight was created with I'll give you the big vision. The big vision is, and it touches my heart. The big vision is, I want somebody to be able to come to me who was like me, whether they're a man or woman, anyone who has lost a spouse. They can come to me and be like, I lost everything, or I need help. And it's like, check it. We are going to pay for your rent. We're going to pay for all your bills. Oh, sorry. Like, we're going to cover you in this time of grief, because technically after loss, you have to have a year to really be able to adjust, because you're not thinking clearly to make big decisions after the loss, because you're still in shock. So they say, don't make any big decisions for at least a year. So I'm like, the desire and the reason why it was created was so that through that year, you don't have to trip. If you were a widow and your husband was the sole bread maker and now he's gone, well, we're going to cover you so that all you have to focus on is you and your family. Are you by yourself getting better? If he was the bread maker and you were the one taking care of the home, and you want to learn a new trade, then okay, we'll put you through school. We'll help you get a job. So then by that next year, you are now emotionally, spiritually, financially, mentally, and physically ready to move forward. And as this is taking place, if you do have children, we are now teaching you how to take care of those babies, you know, how to grieve with them, and how to grow from there. And so it's just, A Widow's Fight is really just a ministry, and it's for basically pretty much anyone who has lost a loved one. There's resources there. I do grief classes, so we go through the grief process, but I think what's unique to mine is it incorporates God in it. So every time we learn about a stage of grief, we also learn about an attribute of God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it gives you both.
Wow.
So that you understand who God is. So by the time you finish Mind Grief class, you understand what you're going to go through naturally, but you understand who he is spiritually and that he can actually help you through this process. So we do that. And then any basic needs. And then for families who have not experienced loss, it's encouraging the family. So I've done different events like hair workshops, teaching dads how to do their daughter's hair, or, you know, moms how to do their kids' hair. And just building that family groundwork, because if any of the spouses were to go, it's preparing families to be, no one's prepared for it,
Right.
but it's building families to be able to adjust a little better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even this conversation right now and the
Yeah.
conversations that I've had with Judy have helped me to prepare for something like that, you know? And I mean, obviously you can never be ready and fully prepared for it until it happens. And then you're just kind of like, you know, but it's good to have the tools,
Yes.
Emotionally and spiritually, so that when those things do happen, like we've been saying, you do not sorrow as those with no hope.
Yeah.
So how did you get that ministry off the ground? You're saying you're able to take care of people. How did that happen? Are you partnering with the church? What's going on?
Definitely no partnership with my church. Not that I didn't want to, but
Yeah.
my church didn't partner.
That's all good.
It just didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the big picture vision. So we're not there all the way yet to take care of people for a year. Now it's just like, oh, you need a little bit, I got you.
Yeah.
And that's really coming from me. I work full time. And then I have my clothing line, of course, which is the God is t-shirts.
Okay.
That's me.
Cool.
And then in the back, it has the attributes of God. And so
Oh, really? That's cool. I saw the shirt, but I didn't see the back yet, and I was like, God is...
So my back says mighty.
Okay.
And then it has embedded in it the scripture Zephaniah 3:17, where it says, the Lord your God in the midst of you is mighty.
Yeah.
So that every shirt... So, okay, we'll
every
go
shirt
there.
is a different attribute of God?
Yes.
Okay.
And they can also be personally made.
Okay.
So they're black and white.
Okay.
They're black because it resembles the darkest moment you experience. And then it's white because it shows who God reveals himself to be in your darkest moment. And so now when you walk around, you're seen by who he is, not by what you went through.
Okay.
So that's what it is. And then people can make their own, and people have made their own. My mom, hers that she made was God is provider, because of course she needed that. Single mom, taking care of kids, husbands are not there, struggling, being homeless, all this stuff. I've known God to be a provider in my life. So that was her shirt. And so different people can make their own.
That's great.
And this was a creative way to bring some income into a widow's fight.
Oh,
so it's connected.
Gotcha.
So
thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Because the Bible says this in James, that that true and undefiled religion is that we take care of the widows and the fatherless. And so if anybody says, oh, religion's bad, no, stop yourself, check yourself. The scriptures make it very clear that if we're to put feet to our faith, that we, because the Bible also says in James that faith without works is dead. And so if you want to put feet to your faith, then this is a great ministry to support, because maybe offhand you don't know any widows or fatherless people right now, but that doesn't mean they ain't out there. There's lots of them. I think San Bernardino County has the most foster youth in the country right now. And so, and I imagine that most of our audience is in San Bernardino County. So keep in mind those things. And I know how important a ministry to widows is, because I happen to know a couple widows, and I think you've met Susan Sorian, who's a good friend of mine. I saw you tagged in a picture with her years ago.
Okay.
At a conference at Carrie Chapel, Murrieta Hot Springs, and she's a widow too. And and so I've had talks with her, and she lives in Texas now. But anyways, through my talks with her, I kind of it grew in my heart, like, man, like there's this group of people that are out there that the Bible tells us that hey, this is a specific area that you need to pay attention to if you want to put feet to your faith. And so this is a great way to help out, is buy some shirts, or even just
donate,
slide it through.
Heck
But
slide that.
So how many people are a part of your organization right now? Is it just you?
It is me, and then I have my sister, who is like my assistant on the side.
Okay.
But it's really just it's us two dedicated. When I've done different events, of course, we had like Mr. Juan Solis and different people who have supported me and had my back forward. But as far as like building everything, it's me right now. Like I am grinding for this passion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, may the Lord bless that endeavor, because I think as we'll all see now that it's a truly genuine effort.
Yes.
To show God's love to God's brokenhearted, to people who need that love and that care and attention in a physical way.
Yes.
And so, Jessica, I just want to thank you so much for coming here to share your story and to share your heart with us. And I just pray that that this message would go far and that it would have lasting fruit, that people would from this be equipped with how to sorrow as those with hope.
Yes.
And just once again, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for listening and watching with us. I just want to encourage you to reach out to those that you know that are brokenhearted. Just remember that the scriptures promise that if you are brokenhearted, or if you are in need of comfort, that we serve the God of all consolation, the scriptures teach. And as a Christian, maybe you're not going through some type of grief or sorrow right now, but there's definitely people in your life that might be, and it's important to show love and affection and attention to those people in the area of prayer and understanding, listening. I've found that to be most effective in my time of ministry and having relationships with people. Listening is key. And so I just want to encourage you guys. God bless you guys. Thanks for watching.